Reading 40 from the Psychological Commentaries on the Teaching of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky by Dr. Maurice Nicoll, Volume 2, Birdlip, October 7th, 1944. Valuation of the work. On one occasion, G spoke about the importance of being good merchants. He said in so many words, quote, "Many things are said about merchants in ancient sacred writings. For example, several things are said about merchants in the Gospels. You have to learn what it means to be good merchants." End quote. On another occasion, speaking of the work he was teaching, G said, "I have good leather to sell for those who wish to make shoes." Practical common sense must enter into the work. For instance, if I do not value the work, practical common sense will tell me that I will begin to lose it. One easily loses what one does not value. A practical relation to the work is necessary, as G indicated in the above words, not a sentimental one. When I do not work, I find the work at an increasing distance from me. It is not surprising that this should be so. It is a practical question. When I work, I get something from the work sooner or later, and when I do not work, I do not get anything from the work. This is a practical relation of things, and as a good merchant, I should be capable of seeing how the matter stands and what to expect. If I put nothing into the bank, I will soon be overdrawn. But remember that in the case of the work as a bank, it pays good interest. It gives back considerably more than you put in. This idea is often spoken of in the New Testament and elsewhere. For example, in the Sermon on the Mount, the words occur, "Give, and it shall be given unto you, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over." Luke 6:38. Let us take the saying of G, that he has leather to sell for those who wish to make shoes. Two stages are shown. First, one must buy the leather, and second, one must make it into shoes for oneself. What does this buying of leather mean? No one will buy leather if he does not value it. Later on, the question continually arises as to how one values the work. What one started with becomes useless. What is the quality of one's evaluation of it at this moment? On this depends the capacity of eventually making shoes. However, for a long time, one's valuation of the work is inevitably mixed up with all sorts of other ordinary valuations in life, and has to lie side by side with them. Afterwards, a separation begins. The inner taste is developed to the point of discriminating internally between one's different kinds of valuing. Valuing has really to do with what one loves. Now, for a long time, we love through ourselves as reflected in others. Love is a difficult word, used in many senses, on many scales, and usually absurdly. The central idea of the work is that there is another order above us. If one disbelieves this, then the work remains as something on the same scale as life and its interests. In life, we do things from a certain side, difficult to define. On this subject, Mr. Ouspensky once spoke in private. Someone said, "Self-love." He was not satisfied with this definition. Others said, "Self-admiration," "self-merit," and so on. Someone suggested self-liking. Mr. Ouspensky seemed more inclined to this word and said, "Yes, something like that. One has to see it acting, however, apart from words. If one does this work only from self-liking, one's valuation of the work is mixed up with this factor. The work is not a higher order yet, not something beyond oneself. It rests actually on one's self-esteem. Naturally, if the self-esteem, the self-liking is offended, the work fades and becomes a remote thing. This difficulty belongs to everyone. A man or a woman, people like ourselves, through self-admiration or self-liking, really love themselves in preference to others, and under the influence of this form of love, despise others in comparison with themselves. It is not difficult to observe this point or level in oneself. In that situation or at that level of being, we are liable to dislike or even hate those who do not pay us proper attention, and in some way respect or honor us, and our viewpoints and behavior, and do not, to some extent, praise or approve what we do or say. So we feel a desire for revenge, for retaliation, or even cruelty, if this form of love is not satisfied. We may love very much all those who pay us sufficient homage in one way or another. That is, our love is connected with an expansion of our self-love. It is rarely independent of it. From this basis, we usually start in this work. So we take the work as an expansion of ourselves that feeds the self-merit. This, I have already said, is inevitable at first. Its presence can be seen by self-observation and reflection. The work, then, is not really something bigger than oneself, but something that under favorable circumstances makes one feel bigger. But this is a usual course, an experience that one must have until some feeling makes one face it and see on what basis one values the work. One asks oneself, what is the quality of my valuation? Where do I put the work in myself? Is my valuation of myself far greater than my valuation of the work? The first step is to realize that it is, and not pretend. Now, a change in the quality of the love always represents a change in the level of being. One can be taught all things, but unless the level of being is raised, it leads to nothing. This is the greatest problem of esoteric or conscious teaching, whose aim is to raise man from barbarism. Barbarism increasingly threatens us today in this age when knowledge is taken as the goal and not change in the level of being. Knowledge and being must grow together to produce understanding. Now, self-liking, self-love, self-admiration, self-merit, vanity, and so on, if they take the first place, indicate a level of being from which the work cannot develop later on. One must love the work, not oneself only. There's a certain insight possible whereby one sees, in a glimpse, the size of oneself in respect of the size of the work. However, this insight comes long before anything can be done about it. But it means that some eye or some eyes that wish to work have got free momentarily from the mass of eyes that live in the atmosphere of life interests, of self-praise, etc., and begin to feel other influences. It is like the difference between something thick, dark, and heavy, and something freer and lighter, and having more light. One can then only be aware that one has not got the right kind of valuation. It is a feeling uncritical in itself, comparable to realizing that one is dressed badly or in some vulgar style. It means, of course, the attitude to the work is wrong. An attitude is what we are mentally dressed on, our mental clothes. One has to find how to dress the mind and feeling. One has to search for clothes of the right kind and change them on the right occasions. The work cannot be a function of life. I mean, we cannot make our feeling of it depend on our daily personal successes or failures. It is certainly different in quality and demands a different quality of love. I say love because I see little difference between love and valuation when taken in a practical way. I say that valuation is love, and I say also that if you say you love a person and do not value that person, it is not love. You must love the work, to feel it and to teach it. Peter is asked if he loves, and answers yes, and is told by Christ, "Feed my lambs." But he cannot, because his love is mixed with self-love too much. So he is told at last, "Feed my sheep." Peter does not possess the quality of love denoted by the word used when Christ asks him the question the first and second times. He understands love as a violent, jealous, easily hurt state, a self-love expanded. Then nothing penetrates to the essence and feeds it. So the third time in asking the question, Christ uses another word for love, the word used by Peter all through the passage. Christ has been speaking of conscious love that has no opposite. Here is something marvelous for us to think about, the quality, the valuation of our love. Everything starts and everything depends on this groundwork, which must change, and so change us. Otherwise, one crystallizes out at a poor level. There is a valuation that feeds everything young and fresh in us and is capable of infinite varieties of understanding and growth compared with lambs. That cannot be anything heavy, sheep-like. It cannot be something tedious, nor can it be connected with any ingrained insincerity of mind. One can take pleasure in the existence of this work. One can take interest in its teaching and in reflection on what it says about man and his life on this planet. These are necessary forms of valuation, but they do not conflict with the self-love, so they do not make the work emotionally strong enough. You must, said G, be capable of being turned and twisted in every direction in this work and keep your direction. End quote. This means, of course, that your valuation of the work, your attitude to it, your love of it is stronger than all the manifestations of the self-love. Nothing that can happen to you can break you. The work is then another being in you, another body. But this being, this body, cannot be formed from the self-love. This is the point. For a long time, all that can be done is to notice oneself in all these connections of which I have spoken above.